Do you struggle with painting realistic water? Perhaps you overcomplicate it or just can't make it look realistic. Well, in this video, I'm going to show you how to paint water with just a few brush strokes, as well as give you some tips on landscape painting in general. And I'm going to show you with this painting here, which I painted outdoors along the Kawarau River in New Zealand. Now, even though I'm painting outdoors, all of this is just as applicable to the studio. Okay, so I found this awesome spot to paint by the river here, so I'm going to paint this view. I've got to be quick because it's forecast to rain later, so I've got my Pashar box easel set up. Got to get painting right now. So here are the colours I'm using: titanium white, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, cadmium yellow medium, cadmium red light, alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, cobalt teal and phthalo green. And the brand of paints I'm using is Blue Ridge Oils, and if you want to get some, I've put a link in the description box below. I'm painting on an 8x10 linen canvas panel. They're made by Seascape, and if you want to get some of those, again, I've put a link in the description box below. So I'm going to get into it. Right, so I'm sketching out my composition here, and I'm using burnt sienna mixed with liquid original, so the liquid's going to speed up the drying time. There's some really beautiful poplar trees over there that I'd like to also include. So I'm going to pop those in my painting as well. So there's a nice stand of trees there on the hill. And paint those in. Right, there's my composition sketched out. So the first thing we're going to do is to paint the dark values and shadows first. Now the colours I'm using to paint my shadows is burnt sienna, ultramarine blue. We'll use a little bit of alizarin crimson. Really important to get these shadows down, and then we can work in the areas of light. Now then, the sun's mainly shining on the scene, so there's not a whole lot of shadows. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to mix in a little bit of yellow ochre into my mix and some more ultramarine blue, and I'm going to start painting the shadows in the trees. Now, trees are some of the darkest values in the landscape, so this is an important fact to remember when you're painting landscapes, especially when you're painting outdoors. The upright plains, which are the trees, are the darkest values in the landscape, followed by the slanting plains of the mountains are also pretty dark. That also includes rocks. The ground plains of the grass, a lot lighter in value, and then the lightest values in the landscape, generally the clouds and sky. There is exception to these rules, but something to remember when you're painting landscapes in general makes things a lot easier. So the other main rule as well is we'll find our darkest darks and our lightest lights in the foreground. Then as landforms recede, the darks aren't as dark and the lights aren't as light. Now, one thing about plein air painting is it teaches you to paint quickly. When I paint in the studio, I paint in the exact same way. So don't worry about it if you're not a plein air painter. All of this applies to studio work. So there we go. We've pretty much got the darks established. I'm going to paint in the cloud shadows as well, actually. So for the cloud shadows here, I'm using ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, a little alizarin crimson and titanium white. We'll just get the suggestion of clouds. So clouds are generally pretty light in value, depends if they're stormy or not, but most of the time they're pretty light. I'm just marking in roughly where the cloud shadows are going to go. And that's how dark value is established. So now we can start painting the areas in light. The first thing I'm going to do is start painting the water. I want to capture the colours of the water before it clouds over. So the water here, really nice turquoise blue colour, and then we've got a bit of a reflection of those trees. I want to start mixing that colour right now. So I'm going to use some, first of all, let's get some titanium white. So we've got some titanium white, we're going to use some ultramarine blue. Then we're going to use a little bit of phthalo green. That's going to give it its nice turquoise colour. And then we'll mix in a little bit of yellow ochre. So when you're painting this type of water, you don't need to overcomplicate the colour mixtures. Just in general with colour mixing, just keep it simple. You don't need to overcomplicate it. You don't need to use loads of colours either. I've got 9 colours including titanium white on my palette. We want to get this nice water in. I might bring that out a bit further there. And we're just going to get some of those nice blue tones in there, the water. Now right now at this stage of the painting, because I'm seriously trying to paint as quickly as possible, I just want to get the main colours down, and then if it clouds over after that, it's not going to be a problem. I've already got my darks established. that's already good. We're already good to go with that. There's a few waves in there as well, so we can add those in. What I've done here is I've just added a bit more ultramarine blue and yellow ochre. Just get some of that turbulent looking water. So we'll get some of those cloud or sky colours in the foreground here as well. So this is more of a warmer blue. It's ultramarine blue with some burnt sienna, some titanium white and a little bit of alizarin crimson. So we'll just mix some of that in. Just it's obviously reflecting some of these sky tones in there. So I really want to paint those gorgeous autumn colours for the poplar trees. So we'll start and mix those on the palette right now. So we'll get some more liquid and let's get some yellow ochre. We'll get some cadmium yellow medium and we'll get some cadmium red light. So we'll just use this to start with. We'll use a bit of titanium white in there as well. We'll just use this to start with. A lot of these trees, they're starting to turn colour, but they're not completely yellow, so still lots of green in them. I think this looks cool. I think it's going to look really nice in this painting, but we can start putting that in now. We'll just get some of those yellow tones in there. I'm trying to be as quick as I can actually. We'll get some yellows in there as well as a couple of yellow trees. Now then, next, let's get some green in there. So I'm going to get some more cadmium yellow and we're going to get some ultramarine blue. So we're going to mix some green. Now we want to make that green look more natural and we can green it up a bit with some cobalt teal, and then we're going to use some burnt sienna. So the burnt sienna contains red. Red is opposite to green on the colour wheel. So if you want some nice natural looking greens, then add something that contains red. Burnt sienna works really well when you're painting things like poplar trees and things like that. So we'll get some of these greens in here. Now, one of the things is I've laid my darks in obviously, but the liquid later on will have dried them a bit, and then what I'll do towards the end of the painting is I'll start and restate my dark value. So I'll go over and repaint these shadows. Still getting in some of these greens there. Let's get that down the bottom. Now then, there's trees that are half turning colour along there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some yellow ochre. This is just going to warm up the green, but it's also going to reduce the chroma or the saturation. So we can get some nice autumn olive tones here that are in the midground for some of these trees. I am kind of relying on the fact that the liquid's going to dry a bit as well, so I can paint some highlights, but right now I'm just getting colour down on the canvas because I'm just fully aware that the weather's set to change later on. Next I'm going to paint the vegetation that's on the pine trees. So pine trees or conifers in general, they're definitely a lot darker in value. So we want a nice dark green mix. So I'm using ultramarine blue, we've got some bit of cadmium yellow medium, some yellow ochre, and we'll get some burnt sienna in there as well. So sort of a dark, low chroma green mix. I could probably even mix a dash of phthalo green in there as well. Phthalo green is a great colour to boost the saturation of your greens. You just got to be careful you don't use too much of it because it's very strong. You can easily overpower your mixture. But anyway, we'll just get in the suggestion of these trees here. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to paint those sandy tones in the side of the hill. So we're going to use some yellow ochre, some burnt sienna. Let's use a bit more burnt sienna, some ultramarine blue, and we're going to use some titanium white. Nice simple colour mix there. I'm just going to paint in between these trees here. Now then, the next thing to do is to paint some of these reflections from the trees in the water. I'm just using the green mix that I use for the foliage here. Just added a little bit more ultramarine blue and yellow ochre, and we're just going to mark in some of these shadows and some of these reflections. We can perhaps get a bit of yellow and things like that. Right, the next thing I'm going to do is paint some of these rocks and stones. So I'm going to use this existing mix that I've made here. I'm going to add some titanium white with some burnt sienna, and we'll get some of that ultramarine blue in there, bit of alizarin crimson. So these rocks, they're kind of a metallic colour. So you can see already that it's some clouds coming, so I don't know if that's the start of this weather system. Got to keep painting here. Alright, and now I'm going to paint the banks of the river along here. Okay, right, I think next we'll get in the sky and the white water, finish up the water, and then I can work on restating the dark values. Right, next I'm going to paint the clouds here, cloud highlights, get those on there. I'll mix in the colours, blend in the clouds in a bit. I just want to get the highlights in first, and then I'm going to paint some highlights on the water. So we'll start getting those in. Right, next I'm going to paint the sky. Let's keep the sky simple, so we'll just use a titanium white. We've got some cobalt teal. You could also use phthalo green if you wanted, and ultramarine blue, so a nice sky colour. Now the way to capture skies to make them look more interesting is just to do downwards brush marks. It adds texture to the sky, just makes it look more painterly. Well, the sun's still shining, so that's awesome. So the canvas is now covered. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding some detail and then restate the dark values, and then I'll be saving my lightest values until the end. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start getting in some highlights on some of these trees. So let's start off with our autumn tones again. So we've got cadmium yellow, we've got yellow ochre, a bit of cadmium red light, we'll get some titanium white, and we'll just start painting some more of those leaves in there. Now then, if you're struggling with painting landscapes, perhaps your paintings look flat, you're not able to get the depth and distance in them, you're having difficulties with composition, and then most of all you're having difficulty with colour mixing and getting the tonal values correct, the lights and darks, then come and join me at my art school. Every week I do a live painting class, so I run painting courses there, and then you can watch all the replay, and then there's tons of painting tutorial videos there. The whole idea of the art school is to help you to improve your paintings so that they have the wow factor, and even so that you'd be proud of them and that you could sell them. So if you'd like to join my art school, I'm giving away a 7-day free trial. Just click the link below to join. I'll see you there. Now we're going to add some more greens into the trees here. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get some shadows in these trees. That's just going to help to make them look more realistic. So we'll get some occlusion shadows in there. I'm using a pretty dark tone, mainly ultramarine blue with some yellow ochre. There's a tiny bit of cadmium yellow medium, bit of burnt sienna. Now because I've been using these colours already for these trees, it means they mix in nicely and we get that nice colour harmony. So colour harmony is where the colours just look nice, the painting reads well to the viewer, and we can do this by using common colours throughout the painting. So like I've used ultramarine blue in the sky, in the clouds, in the trees, in the water, and trying to carry these common colours across helps to make your paintings look more realistic, much more harmonious in terms of colour, and it will give your paintings the wow factor. Now having shadows in the landscapes is really going to go a long way to making them look much more realistic. So that's what I'm working on now, painting these shadows. Now then, let's get some more of these shadows in the sides of the trees here. Now the thing about using a synthetic flat brush is you're going to get a much more defined mark. You can get a lot more detail with it. Really good for painting things like trees, rocks. The brand of brushes I'm using is Rosemary & Co, and if you want to get some, I'll put a link in the description box below. So next I'm going to paint the rock shadows, and I want a nice dark tone here, so I'm just mixing ultramarine blue with burnt sienna. So if you combine these two colours you can create a near black. want a really nice dark tone here. We'll get a bit of a alizarin crimson in there as well, and we'll start getting these rock shadows in. At the moment, I just want to define the edges where some of these rock shadows are, and then I can add some reflected light and things like that afterwards. So I'm definitely at the point in this painting that I just want to think about getting it finished. So now I'm just working in some highlights on some of these rocks using a number 3 synthetic flat brush. Now I'm going to start working in the highlights on top of this hill. Okay, so now I'm just painting some highlights on these pine trees, just a little bit, but starting to get these finished off. So you want to build up your lighter tones, even when you're painting outdoors, especially if you're using liquids. You can take advantage of the fact that the paint dries a little bit. But start off darker and then build up those lighter tones, and then save your lightest lights until the end. So now adding some highlight to these Lombardy poplar trees here, and we're just adding in just a few lighter tones here. Right, I think the next thing to do now is to start working on the water again and getting in some highlights there. So I'll start working on that. Now then, I don't know if you can see that cloud in the distance, but that might be the weather system that's coming in. So close to having this finished. Just want to get it done now, getting in the highlights in the water and then finishing the sky. So we'll do that next. So what I'm doing now is I'm just brushing in a few highlights here, making it look like it's turbulent water. Just using titanium white with a little bit of yellow ochre. And I'm just adding a few little sparkles to the water. Just adds a nice finishing touch to the painting. And put some sparkles around the rocks here as well. Now I'm going to get some branches and main stems in these trees, so just a suggestion. So I'm using a number 0 synthetic rigger brush. Now I'm just filling in the negative spaces around the trees. So really I'm just trying to get this painting finished now. So just tidying up the whole thing, and we'll get the clouds finished here. So just getting the rest of these clouds finished. Just adding some last little highlights to these rocks here. Then I'm just going to add the suggestion of some branches and twigs and things on the trees. And I think after that, that'll be it. And I think that's it. I'm going to turn this around and see what it looks like in the light. And there we go, finished painting. What an awesome day.